First of all, you're gonna use this T25 torque screw to remove 4 of the fender screws, and then remove your fender. Then use the same tool to remove the 4 screws that hold your front and rear foot pad. And then we use this T45 tool to remove 2 of your hot bolts. And then we use this T25 tool to remove all the bumper screws and take off your front bumper. And then we remove the foot pad plug and then the motor plug. Twist them and wiggle them out. Then we remove the rear bumper and the rear foot pad. And we flip the board over to remove 8 of the rail screws that holds the front and rear boxes. And after that, you can take apart the board. We set the rails and the wheels aside, leaving the front and rear boxes. And now we are going to open up the front boxes using this L-shaped tool. And we set aside the lids, and now we are going to put on our gloves, and we are going to use the tool to remove 6 of the screws holding down the ESC. After we do that, we remove the front headlight using the T10 tool. And after that, we are going to unplug this plug and the communication wire that's on the motherboard. We pinch the tab and we pull in the same time. That's how you remove it. And then do the same for the P2 plug, which is the switch, power switch. And then we are going to use this tool to remove the foot pad connector nuts. We set it aside, and we are going to use a spanner to remove the motor plug nuts. And that's how you get the motherboard out. And we are going to store this motherboard inside of a plastic bag. Please be sure that you get the thermal pad on the box, not the ESC. We are going to need that white thermal pad. Now we take out our GTV kit and we put it inside the box. First of all, you have to push the motor and foot pad plug into the holes. And we are going to use the nuts to securely hold them in place. That's a small nut and big nut. Use a spanner to make sure it's tight. And make sure you have 2 O-rings on the motor plug and 1 O-ring on the foot pad plug. Just hand tie them, do not use any other tools to over torque it. And we install the GTV using 3 screws. You will need to use the Loctite we provided, otherwise the screw can be shaken off and shorting the motherboard out. Do it for every single screw you are putting into the boxes. And then we can go to replace the BMS that's inside the rear boxes. You're gonna need this tool to remove all the screws. And after that, you can open the rear lid. And now we are gonna need a T10 Torx screwdriver to remove the cover of the BMS. And then we can remove the output power cable. Please do it in this sequence, otherwise it could damage the BMS. And then we remove this balance plug. You have to pinch the tab and pull in the same time. Just this tab, I'm pointing it out. Pinch and pull, just like that. And then we remove the charging cable, and lastly, the battery terminals. And we take out the purple BMS that's included in the kit, and we store the blue BMS inside of the bag. And then we use the T10 tool to remove the rear light bar. That's the original black one-wheel light bar. We remove it, and we put in our purple light bar. And then we tighten the screw to hold down the lights. And now we install the purple BMS. First of all, we plug in the charging cable and then the battery terminals. Please do it in such sequence. Otherwise, it will not work. It will damage the BMS. First the battery terminal and then the balance plug. This is really important. Don't mess it up. As you plug this in, you will hear a spark. Don't worry about it. And then we put the cover back on it. Tidy up all the wires. Make sure no wires gets pinched. And make sure you install the rear gasket. And now we can power it on to see if it works. Press 2 times, you can switch between 3 different modes of lighting brightness. And then we are going to put back the rear lid. And turn it over, we are going to put all the screws back. They are those silver little screws that have 5 stars. We're gonna use this TT20 5-star tool to install all the screws, and we can flip it over. And now we are going to stick the Bluetooth antenna onto the top of the front box. But first, we are going to install the gasket. Sometimes you will find this gasket too long to fit in the grooves. You can cut the gasket a little bit, cut it short a little bit. Now you peel off this Bluetooth antenna and we stick it on the top lid. It's very fragile part. Please be very careful about this. Make sure you install your gasket, and now we can put other screws back that holds down the top lid. And now we can put everything back together. I'm gonna use a power tool, but you can do it with your hand tool. Plug in the motor plug first. It's a little bit tight. Wiggle it in and put all the screws in it. And then we're gonna install the axle block and the wire holder. Also using this T25 tool. And make sure they are lining up with the hub bolts. And now we put back the hub screws. And we use this T45 tool to tighten it up. Now we put the screws back on. And now we install the foot pad. Make sure that little notch and that little arrow is on top of the connector. And spin this little ring here to make sure it's perfectly tight. And now we can turn the board on to see if it balances. Put your hand on it, be careful. And now the board works. We can put back the bumpers and foot pads. Those are very easy, just make sure you got all the screws in. We slide the front bumper back and we put on some screws. That's very easy. And the rear bumper. And now we can take out our phone to see if the board can spin up to 90 something kilometers per hour. Make sure there's nothing that can be rolled into the board. And now our board is installed with the GTV.